Questions are being asked this morning about what caused yesterday's fire at a central Queensland power station that left hundreds of thousands of people in the state without power. The Qld coal-fired power station, about 10 minutes east of Biloela and 150 k's south of Rockhampton, went offline just after 2 p.m, triggering outages from the New South Wales border right up to Cairns. Tony Wood is the Energy Program Director at the Grattan Institute, and he joins us now from Darwin. Tony, g'day. So this is being described as a fire and explosion in one of 4 generators and unprecedented. Can you explain for us in layman's terms what appears or what might have gone wrong?
Well, in a power station like that, it's usually going to be some significant electrical fault, which then causes a local fire which gets out of control, and then all sorts of things can go wrong from there. In this case, it's not entirely clear how much damage has been done. But what really happens after that, Joe, is that after one unit goes offline because it has had the technical failure, basically it's broken and maybe there's even a fire, the rest of the system then starts to shut down to protect itself. And that's what we saw yesterday afternoon. So it's the localised problem, but it becomes more generalised quite quickly until they bring the whole thing back under control again, which is where we were as of last night and this morning.
And so the fact that it led to so many people losing power right across the state was actually evidence that the system was working in terms of protecting itself?
Look, that's actually true. The system is designed to be able to deal with the loss of a unit like this. They don't plan for them, obviously, but in a system where you've got a relatively small number of big power units, you want to make sure that if one of them fails for whatever reason, at whatever time, the system can cope with that. And exactly what happened yesterday was what's supposed to happen. Broadly speaking, there were a couple of 100,000, I think at one stage 400,000 consumers without power. There were none of the essential services were affected quite so much because many of them had their own backup generators, like hospitals, for example. But broadly speaking, the system did exactly what it was designed to do, and progressively power was restored. And I think that's what then happened overnight, Joe.
And so it appears the damage is limited to one of the 4 generators at this plant. They're still investigating it, but that's what they're saying initially, at least. Are there likely to be significant ongoing challenges with energy generation in Queensland because of what happened yesterday at Qld or not?
Well, the best understanding is that a combination of balancing other arrangements, at least for a while, will be fine. Again, as I said, the system is designed to work without one of those units. Now, of course, in a catastrophic problem, if something else happened, then that would become more difficult again. But in the short to medium term, I think we're okay. Now, until they've assessed the extent of the damage and if there's been any consequences for the other 3 units at that power station, we won't really know what the outlook is going to look like. And that will happen quite quickly. I mean, the engineers will be crawling all over that this morning. And, of course, there will be a major investigation into what happened. Part of the power station, this Qld power station, is about 30 years old and was already scheduled. The closure date had been brought forward. But 2 of the units, possibly one of the ones that failed, are actually quite new, less than 20 years old or about 20 years old. So it could or it may or may not be associated with age. But the evidence I've seen so far suggests that it's probably not. It's something to do with a technical problem caused probably by initially some electrical fault, which then resulted in a fire.
What do you make of the Queensland Government statement that this shows the importance of having a diverse power network to deal with emergencies like this?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. If everything's all in one space and it all goes down at once and you've only got one, imagine if you had, if you were at home and you only had your solar PV on your roof and it failed, you'd be in trouble. But if you're connected to the grid, you're not. So a diverse system, not only within Queensland, but also across the country becomes important. So yesterday, Queensland would have been exporting electricity to New South Wales, and when this happened, they were able to quickly switch that around and bring power into Queensland from New South Wales. So there is real value in what we call the integrated national electricity market. And I think that this incident demonstrates again how much value there is in diversity, and I agree completely with the Queensland Government on that aspect.
Just on another subject, Tony, the discussion around the federal government's planned new gas-fired power plant in the Hunter region of New South Wales. When this was announced the other day, there was a lot of discussion about it. You had a bit to say about it. The federal government said evidence of the need for the plant was apparent with the Tomago aluminium smelter in that region having to shut down significant capacity to keep the grid working to put downward pressure on prices. What did you make of the reasoning, mixed in with that announcement?
Well, I think I'm not inside the commercial arrangements between Tomago Aluminium Smelter and their electricity supplier AGL, but most of those arrangements for big smelters, and the major two in the east coast of Australia is the Portland smelter in Victoria and the one in Tomago in Newcastle, and the arrangements usually have an agreement in which those smelters are effectively paid to reduce their output. I also would note that at the time, it looked to me like there was plenty of electricity available, but the way some of the suppliers were bidding into the market meant that the commercial arrangements suggested to Tomago that was going to be a very expensive alternative. Now, again, I'm not inside the decision-making of Tomago, but it seems to me that we weren't near a catastrophe. And I point out also that if Liddell had been closed now, roll forward to 24-25, then the market operator would operate the system fundamentally quite differently to make sure that whilst Tomago may have come offline partly, it would not have been closed down to the extent that all the aluminium would have set solid, and then we'd had a major problem. So I think it's to say that this was we just averted a catastrophe is very much overstating what really happened in Tomago, as well as people. There's a link here because people are also, in some cases, I think, overstating the consequences or the implications of what happened in Queensland yesterday.
Well, yeah, I don't think the federal government was saying they averted a catastrophe. They were just saying that was evidence of the need for a gas-fired plant. But you reject that?
All the evidence I've seen is simply not the case. Now, if there'd been that gas-fired plant, would it have been running? Because my understanding is there is a gas-fired plant not very far from this situation in New South Wales, which is owned by Snowy Hydro, that wasn't running. And Snowy Hydro itself, the main power station, presumably could have also provided power. The market operator certainly did not step in and try and cause Tomago to turn down, as far as I know. It was a decision made by them. So, I think I don't completely disagree with the minister that wouldn't have been nice, but you wouldn't build a 600 megawatt, over $600 million facility just to avoid Tomago reducing their consumption 2 or 3 times. It just doesn't make any sense. There are far better ways to address that, and we have the knowledge and the systems in place, mostly, to do that. And I think a commercial arrangement is far better.
Okay, Tony Wood from the Grattan Institute. Thanks for talking to us this morning from Darwin.
Thanks, Joe.